A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome to day 1 of 99 that I have here of my new epic journey relating to film reviews known as Films I Should Have Talked About Years Ago, where I simply revolve around different films that I've seen over the course of, well, the past 10 years or so. And now is where I come back in full force and talk about these films individually on these 99 days. That's 99 films in total. And I'm more than grateful that I managed to spend all this time in particular watching these different films and seeing what I could potentially come up with for different segments of this series whenever possible to talk about different things. So now is where I have to go and pick one of 99 different films that I have seen on various streaming platforms like Netflix, Hulu, Crackle, Disney+, HBO Max, or others of any sorts. The first pick I have right now to showcase is Battleship. Yep, Battleship. Loosely centered off of the famous board game by Hasbro of the same name. Except this, in particular, happens to take on the term battleship in a whole new way. Yes, of course, it is centered off of the American Navy and military forces that utilize these sorts of sea vessels and giants to the best of their advantage as a way to fight off warfare while on the waters of all sorts throughout the world. In this instance, we have Battleship being taught as a story about an ancient race of aliens from another world coming down to Earth to attempt to seek out humanity as some sort of threat to their existence. The aliens are seen as hostile and have their own sorts of battleships that are able to fire lots of different weapons onto any sort of military vessel they come across near Pearl Harbor. What happens here is, simply put, it does try to be a lot like the game itself. The pieces, of course, that are fired by the alien ships happen to actually resemble the game pieces themselves, even though they are not colored white or red to resemble hits or misses. But the main thing is that the shape of these large explosive devices that the aliens fire on the battleships, you can see in several shots that they look exactly like the shape of the game pieces. So that's one point for accuracy right there, and in terms of being loyal to the actual board game. And the film itself actually does take a few other liberties here and there, like the way that they happen to cut back and forth between the waters and land. Because obviously nobody would want Battleship to just be all about a war going on the sea front with battleships firing at each other, something like that. So of course they do try to invent some new things here and there, like utilizing certain vessels that were present in the game as well, like destroyers and submarines. Those, of course, are not used quite as much, but then, of course, there come along some of the other more well-known pieces out there, the carrier, and then, of course, towards the end of the film, we have ourselves the almighty, old-fashioned battleship. That's right. The same kind of vessel that was used during World War II. And this vessel, of course, is taken out to the seas to attempt to dispatch any of the remainder of the alien species themselves. We also can't forget that there were certainly a lot of other things that were taking place, because like I said, the film does take some liberties here and there just to at least go along with the kind of original story while still attempting to be true towards the game itself and towards the kind of playing style that is utilized, where you use a set of coordinates in A and numbers, letters and numbers, put together into a certain sequence to launch a corresponding attack on a particular point on the map. And of course this is in fact present during a couple parts in the movie where there are some coordinates being mentioned in there as a way to fire off the weapons towards the aliens themselves. To be fair, while it does remain true and loyal to the game itself and also gives us a bit of, well, an idea of what the game would have been like if it were made into a movie. But I guess the big cons here would be the fact that sometimes it tries not to be like the game in most ways. And there, of course, are times where some people might complain about how a movie does happen to have too much loyalty into something. And we've seen that happen with a lot of different adaptations that were taken on, whether if it were based on video games or books or real life stories. Just to offer a few examples. Battleship does try to be a bit more original than most people would have expected it to be. In terms of being based off of a Hasbro board game, I'd say Battleship does at least have some credit for having some originality put into it, whereas some people would have probably had seen a concept of the film not so necessarily being made into what it is now. But for something that's nearly 10 years old, I'd say the movie Battleship is worth a watch, especially if you are in fact about alien invasions and warfare based tropes along the way. And so as a result, in terms of giving it a KFN official scoring, I'd say it's a bit difficult to put together, especially because, well, the film is still fresh in my mind, so I still remember a lot of details about it, and a lot about what the film has, including cast and crew members, screenwriters, producers, and the director, of course. I'd say in total, it all comes down to a solid 7.2 out of 10. For a KFN official scoring on Battleship, I'd say that's fair. Maybe some of you might think differently in terms of how the film would play itself in comparison to others that came out during that same year. But I feel like that it would probably be best for you to stick around and listen in to some other new things that I'll be able to talk about based on all this. Though, just a reminder, there's also going to be plenty of other things that I will be able to talk about based on films that I should have talked about years ago. So if you want to see more, go down to my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.